everybody, and welcome to week 2 of our teaching series called Catalyst, where we're talking about what transforms our faith and how transformation ultimately is what catalysts do. Now, last week we talked a little bit about how catalysts either create change or they kind of speed things up. They speed the process of changing up. Before we go any further, I want to make sure each of us in the room understands what a catalyst is, and what better way to do that than a science experiment. So, we're going to talk a little bit about elephant toothpaste. Has anyone in the room heard of this? This is like something that I'm not terribly familiar with, but I feel like my 6-year-old probably is. Nash probably knows exactly what elephant toothpaste is, but we are going to watch a quick video on how it is that elephant toothpaste is made. Let's watch that now.
Alright, today's experiment is elephant toothpaste, a wonderful chemical reaction with stuff you most likely already have at home. What you'll need is 1/2 cup of hydrogen peroxide. This is 3%, the kind you can buy at most stores. Add that to your container. Here I have a flask, but a lot of different containers will work. And then you'll add a few squirts of liquid dish soap. For a cooler effect, add food coloring. You'll need a packet of yeast. Dissolve that in 3 tablespoons of warm water. Or instead of yeast, you can buy some potassium iodide. Dissolve that in 2 tablespoons of water. Here we have a side-by-side comparison, and on the left we have yeast, on the right we have potassium iodide. We add it, and ooh, there we go. The yeast is giving us a lovely display of foam as it oozes out of the container. Beautiful. But the iodide is being kind of sad and pathetic, so we're going to speed it up a bit. Finally, here we go. Iodide gets it out of the container. Alright, so yeast seems to be the winner there, but for a cooler effect, we can use stronger hydrogen peroxide. This is 35%. You'll want adult supervision with this. It is very strong and can burn your skin. 3% hydrogen peroxide on the left, 35% on the right, using potassium iodide, and woo! There we go. A lovely display of foaming, oozing gases trapped in soap and stuff. Fit for an elephant's mouth.
Thanks to Squint Science for showing us exactly how to make elephant toothpaste. And again, I'm sure most of you probably already know how to make it. Maybe you've made it at home already. But here's the thing. Did you notice that as soon as you add that last ingredient, that's when things happen? It becomes pretty clear what the catalyst to that science experiment is, because as soon as you add it in, things become explosive. So that's what a catalyst is. Again, it's something that either creates big change or causes a change to speed up. And it's not something we talk about only in science class. So let me ask you this question. Have you ever found yourself picking up like a new habit or a new quirk or a new interest because someone in your life that you admire has influenced you to do so? Maybe they tell you, maybe you have somebody in your life who tells you constantly, like, you need to watch this TV show. And so finally you decide, you get on Netflix and you watch that TV show. Or maybe you saw someone at school wearing something like completely ridiculous and you're like, whoa. Like, maybe that doesn't look that bad after all. And so you try that new fashion trend because someone at school did. Or maybe you see something on social media, you're like, I've got to try that. That looks awesome. I saw this elephant toothpaste YouTube video. I'm going to try making that at home. Think about that for a second. Who has influenced you in your life, and how did they influence you? Naturally, the people that we surround ourselves with are going to influence us in certain ways. Again, whether it's the things we wear, the things we watch, or maybe it's the things we say. And if you found that happening to you in the past, congratulations, you now know exactly what a catalyst is. It's the person in your life who influenced you to make a change, even if that change is really, really small. I want to tell you really quickly about one of the catalysts in my life when I was growing up. So in high school, one of my youth pastors, his name was Rick, and Rick was awesome. He was constantly encouraging me and loving me in different ways. And one of those ways actually happened when I came back from my first couple of years of Bible school, of university. I came home and Rick was like, hey, you should take on this youth ministry within our church. And so he kind of handed me the keys to the junior high ministry and said, you should take this on. And it was my first real taste of what it was like being a youth pastor, and I loved it. But Rick was constantly influencing me. I wanted to preach like Rick. I wanted to do ministry like Rick. I wanted to be like Rick because of how amazing he was at what he did. Rick was a catalyst in my life. The people in our lives that end up being the biggest catalysts are the ones that we look up to, or the ones that we spend time learning from, or just spend time being with. These catalysts in our lives influence us in huge ways even when we don't realize that we're being influenced by them, which is one of the reasons we need to pay careful attention to who it is that we're allowing to influence us. The truth of the matter is you cannot avoid being influenced by other people. That's just a fact. But you can be more wise in who it is that you're allowing to influence you by the amount of time that you spend with them. And especially when it comes to our faith, the people that we're allowing to influence our faith. Now, last week, Pastor Matt came and he spoke and he talked a little bit about the book of Hebrews. And so we're going to go back into the book of Hebrews tonight, which I'm super excited about because it's one of my favorite books of the Bible. I hope that it's slowly becoming, or maybe quickly becoming, one of your favorites. It is an amazing book of the Bible. Just like we have people who are catalysts in our life, maybe the book of Hebrews can become a catalyst for your faith when you read it. So last week, Matt and you talked a little bit about this long list of people who were known for their faith in God. And these people didn't just believe in God in theory, they actually put their faith into practice by doing things. They proved their faith in God through their actions, which is super cool. And so we're going to get back to the book of Hebrews again, but first I want to give you a little bit of background on one person that the book of Hebrews talks a lot about, and his name is Moses. So the full story of Moses can be found in the book of Exodus, and I really do encourage you, if you don't know his story, go and read it because it is an incredible story. This book, the book called the Bible, is filled with great stories that teach us so much about our lives and our faith, and so go read it. But if you want like the movie version, you can watch The Prince of Egypt if you've either heard of that or seen it before. It is a really great retelling of the life of Moses. But again, I encourage you to go and read it on the YouVersion app or on your paper Bible because the book of Exodus is amazing. But I want to give you a little bit of a summary before we move forward today. So here's the first thing you need to know. The nation of Israel, which was God's chosen people, were put into slavery by the Egyptian people before Moses was even born. Over generations and generations, the Israelites grew, and all of a sudden, Pharaoh, who was in charge of Egypt, was worried that the Israelites would rebel against them and take over. So this is really sad, but in order to protect his power and keep the Israelites oppressed, what he decided to do was drown the firstborn boys of these Israelite families in the Nile River so that the men couldn't kind of be born and their population would kind of cease from growing at the rate that it was. And so one of these firstborn boys was named Moses, but his mother, knowing that bad things were going to happen, decided to try and save his life by making this little basket and kind of making sure that it was waterproof on the bottom, putting Moses in the basket, and then floating him down the Nile River. Now, this really cool part of the story is that the daughter of Pharaoh actually finds this basket floating and Moses is inside, and so she takes him out and raises him as her own. But then as Moses grows up in this Egyptian royal household, he sees the way that Pharaoh is oppressing the Israelites, and he's not cool with it. He says, "This is not okay, the way that you're treating my people." Moses had all this power and all this privilege, but he threw it all away to protect an enslaved Israelite man who was being beaten by one of Pharaoh's Egyptian soldiers. He ends up fleeing Egypt altogether and then having this incredible encounter with God in the wilderness through this burning bush, this bush that would just not cease burning. It was crazy. So God speaks to Moses through this burning bush, and here's what he says in Exodus chapter 3, starting at verse 10. It says, "Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people Israel out of Egypt." But Moses protested to God, Who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt?" God answered, "I will be with you. And this is your sign that I am the one who has sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very mountain." Now, you might think after God miraculously protected Moses as a baby, that Moses would just be like ready to go. He'd be all in. But the truth is, it took him a minute to find his faith to make this action happen. Moses, like many of us, struggled to know that he was talented enough to do what God was asking him to do, to know that he had the gifts and the abilities to do what God asked him to do. To help Moses find the faith that he needed, God promised Moses that he would be there with him every step of the way. And he even said, "I'll send along Aaron, your brother, to be with you as you go too." Who were the catalysts in his life as he went along his faith journey? We start with his mom. She was a catalyst because even when things seemed impossible, she knew that she could trust God and she tried to do something bold about it. The moment that Moses saw that man being beaten, that Israelite man being beaten by the Egyptian, that was a moment that was a catalyst because Moses saw that people were worth fighting for. A little bit later on in the story, Aaron becomes a catalyst for Moses because he's willing to partner with him to accomplish God's mission. And even Pharaoh and his soldiers were catalysts for Moses because they showed that there was injustice in the world and evil in the world, and Moses needed to do something about that. And as a result, as we read in the book of Exodus, Moses took up this mission to help free the people of Israel through God's power from the Egyptians. And because of all this that happens, Moses inspires a generation that came behind him and in future generations and was a catalyst for their faith as well. So now that we have a bit of background on Moses, I want to fast forward back to the story of Moses in Hebrews chapter 11, just to see how he was remembered by the author of the book of Hebrews. Here's what it says starting at verse 23. It was by faith that Moses' parents hid him for 3 months when he was born. They saw that God had given them an unusual child, and they were not afraid to disobey the king's command. It was by faith that Moses, when he grew up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to share the oppression of God's people instead of enjoying the fleeting pleasures of sin. He thought that it was better to suffer for the sake of Christ than to own the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking ahead to his great reward. It was by faith that Moses left the land of Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He kept right on going because he kept his eyes on the one who is invisible. It was by faith that Moses commanded the people of Israel to keep the Passover and to sprinkle blood on the doorposts so that the angel of death would not kill their firstborn sons. It was by faith that the people of Israel went right through the Red Sea as though they were on dry ground. But when the Egyptians tried to follow, they all drowned. Moses was a catalyst for the people of Israel back when all this was happening. And then Moses was also a catalyst for the people who are reading the book of Hebrews, these early Christians in the church. And of course, we know that Moses can be a catalyst for us as well when we read his story and understand how it affects our lives today. If you continue to read on in the book of Hebrews near the end of chapter 11 and then into chapter 12, it's amazing to see how faith continues from person to person or catalyst to catalyst. The author of Hebrews uses this incredible phrase, a great cloud of witnesses, to represent the people in the past who show us what our faith can look like going forward. Scripture is just jam-packed with these amazing stories of people's faith that can be catalysts for us. But there are also these amazing stories of people in modern times and ancient times of their faith as well, the way that they put their full trust in who God is. It's so important to know that when we hear these stories or we experience these stories with the people who can be catalysts in our own lives, that we remember that the faith of others can be catalysts for our own journeys. So who are the catalysts in your life? That's the question I want you to be thinking about. And to get you thinking about it, I want to tell you a few of mine. So the first two people are my mom and my dad. It blows me away to see how much they love Jesus constantly. Even as they're getting a little bit older, they love Jesus so much. He is their priority no matter what. The other person is my wife, Bree. She's the person in my life that I can talk to about anything, and that causes her to be this amazing catalyst of faith in my life. Rick, who I told you about, is a huge catalyst in my life, has been for a long, long time, but also Kate and Andrew, who are my small group leaders in grade 11 and grade 12. When God probably made the biggest impact on my life, I remember thinking they were catalysts to me because they were constantly getting me to think further and think more intentionally about my faith. I've got some great friends, like my friends Jordan and Steve, who are constantly having great conversations with me about faith, and those become catalysts to me very often. And then finally, I have my great friend Matt Loveday, who most of you know because he spoke last week, but also because he's an amazing pastor at North Park. But each week I get to talk to Matt about ministry and about church and about faith and about God, and it's amazing because oftentimes those conversations push me further to be closer and closer to Jesus. These people in my life, like my mom and my dad and Bree and Rick and Andrew and Kate and my friends Jordan, Steve, and Matt, they are people who make up this great cloud of witnesses in my life. And they show me what it's like to follow Jesus, and I want to do the same with my life. The author of Hebrews talks a lot about how faith is like running a race, and it's a race of endurance. And how in that race in endurance, we need other people to show us what it means to keep going. So as we're running this race called our faith journey, we need to ask the question, how do we keep going? How do we find great catalysts in our life that will prompt us to follow Jesus more closely? I want you to do 3 things, and I want you to start by finding your catalysts. This week, what if you found a few different people in your life who are at different stages of their faith and just asked them a bunch of questions about why it is that they follow Jesus? Maybe it's someone whose faith journey is new, or someone who's kind of right at the same level as you in terms of their faith journey, or maybe it's someone who's older than you or a little bit further ahead in their faith journey. The second thing I want you to do is keep your focus, because running this race, this faith journey of ours, is an endurance thing. It's like running a marathon. We all get tired, we all get frustrated, we all get discouraged in this race. But like any good long distance runner will tell you, it's all about how you finish. We have to stay focused, and we can help each other do that. This week, what if you chose one friend that you decided you wanted to learn and grow with? Maybe you talk about it together. Maybe you do the reading plan on Catalyst on the YouVersion app together. Something that you can do to help each other progress. What if you set reminders in your phone together that you just like send each other some encouragements throughout the week, or tell each other that you're praying for them throughout the week? And finally, I want you to keep going. Because yes, this is a marathon. Yes, faith journey is important. We're trying to win, but at the same time, it's kind of strange. It's not a competition. You're not behind and you're not losing. There's no one that you need to beat, and you can kind of keep your own pace. So just keep going. Maybe it's easy for a lot of you to think about who the people in your life are that are catalysts for your faith. Or maybe it's really, really difficult. Maybe you don't have a ton of people in your life who you would say are catalysts for your faith. And so tonight, I hope that you know that me as your pastor and your small group leaders and the adults in the room, we can help you figure those things out. We can talk to you about who the catalysts in your life can be. Thinking back to the story of Moses and thinking to the book of Hebrews, we see all these amazing people. And so I want you to remember that the faith of others can be catalysts for our own journey. We've got some amazing people that you can surround yourself with. And God is so great in providing examples throughout Scripture and throughout history of people who can be catalysts for us as well.